recognition that like anything that you're seeking on the outside, it has to start within, it has to be an inside job. So you have to be the one to accept those parts of you that you haven't yet welcomed and accepted before anyone else truly will. You might get lucky and get away with it, that you're like, oh, I'm a piece of shit, I can't accept myself in this. And others might say, actually, you're fine. But until you actually, it really lands for you on a personal level, you're not even going to really hear other people's feedback. But once you can accept those parts of you, and welcome them, begin to welcome them, that's when your environment will begin to, like, your lens will change, and you'll actually start to receive the abundance of opportunity and love and possibility that exists already around you and outside of you, that these little few parts that haven't yet been welcomed into the tribe are still waiting to be met with. So yeah.
Welcome to the Heart of Man podcast, a podcast for any man seeking to live in alignment with his deepest core and lead a life of profound meaning and connection. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm here to empower you through transformative conversations, eye-opening insights, and practical wisdom. Join me now as we venture into the heart of man. Let's dive in. Pete Byrne is a musician, breathwork facilitator, and mindset coach that helps high-level entrepreneurs build lives of sustainable happiness and fulfillment. He's not only a remarkable artist and facilitator, but he's also the host of the Live and Aligned podcast, a show dedicated to inspiring others to live authentically in alignment with their own truth. From an early age, Pete discovered his passion for facilitating transformative experiences, initially channeling this through his work as a musician. And this brought him down a path of traveling across the world to offer his voice through live performances and shows. As health challenges began to emerge caused by his lifestyle, Pete was driven to a point where he needed to assess a more sustainable way of living that didn't require him to live at the cost of his own connection and vitality. And this led him down a path of exploring various different healing modalities in order to find a deeper regulation within himself. Eventually, he was introduced to conscious connected breathwork, taking him down a journey of becoming a facilitator himself. He began to explore how he was able to use his previous skills to now facilitate transformative change, combining breathwork, coaching, and music. Pete and I connected early on in my own journey in Bali, and he's become a dear friend since, who's also been able to support me through some of my own darkest times. With the launching of this podcast, I knew we had to come together for a conversation so he can share his own personal journey, experiences, and wisdom. With a wide array of lessons and insights he learned along the way, I'm sure this will be an incredibly valuable conversation for all you listeners. Let's dive on in. Mr. Pete Byrne, welcome to the Heart of Man podcast. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Thank you very much for having me, man. This is an epic moment.
Yeah, this podcast, this conversation has been a long time in the making. And we've known each other for almost 2 years now. And it's been beautiful as well, just to see as well your development. And currently you're just filling in many roles, many different shoes. You know, you're a musician, you're a breathworker, you are a coach, you are the host of the Alive and Aligned podcast. And as well, you're part of the teaching faculty of the current facilitated training of Breathwork Bali. And it seems to me that a lot of this has accelerated just in the past year. If you were to comment on that, would you say that has been your experience as well?
Yeah, wow. I agree. Yeah, I think it's one of these like bamboo moments where it's like, you know, can be growing under the surface for many years, maybe a bit like this podcast.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden just shoots out of nowhere.
That's it.
And at least to the outside world, it appears like, oh yeah, everything's all coming up at once. But really all the foundations had been laid for many years before, which I'm sure we'll explore today.
And this is something I'm very interested in. And I want to just really hear the arc of the journey, the development that you had to really go through to get to where you are today. And I would like to frame this conversation actually by sharing a personal experience that I had with you, which I feel like sums up who you are in such a beautiful way, at least for me on a more personal level. And from there, I want to offer you just maybe for the audience to share your own personal journey and maybe just to sum up the journey that you've had to go on to get to where you are today. So I want to set the stage.
Yeah. Please, yeah.
It was roughly a year ago.
It's not the time we killed that guy, is it?
No, it was not that time. That's a story for another time.
Yeah.
So it was around a year ago. I was at your villa, and it was our last coaching session.
Uh-huh.
You and I were doing some coaching.
Yeah.
I was going through a really, really rough time. I came out of a, let's say, challenging relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of questions around purpose, and it seemed like the tectonic plates of my life were just shifting around.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I addressed to you was a desire for me to start my own podcast.
Mm.
But at that time, I noticed that there wasn't really that ability to really go into that project yet. And you asked me the question, why do you want to start this podcast? And I don't remember what I said, but I just witnessed the way you observed me, and you were silent, and you were just there to really listen what I feel as the essence of why I want to do this. And I remember you leaving the room. You took all your podcast equipment that you have for your own podcast, mm-hmm. and you're like, here, take this. For the next few months, I'm away. So get out there and do the thing. And that to me really sums up who you are in so many ways, for me at least. And the way I would describe it is that you're someone, the way I've met you is you're somebody who really is on a journey of supporting other people to really connect to their own truth and really do the thing that they're here to do. Mm. So I'm curious if there is some form of event in your own life that may have inspired you to really believe in other people's journeys and as well really support them on their own journey of transformation. I'm wondering if there was something happen, or if there was something that, I wonder if that's always been just who you are. And I'm curious if you want to just as well unfold from here the journey that you've been on and share a little bit about you.
Mm. Yeah, that's epic, man. Thank you. It's great little story. I remember it well. And just to preface that, I think I want to distinguish that I would say I am a almost like a bit of a transformation snob. I only want to work and support people in that way that are really fucking ready to go there. So for me in that moment, what inspired me to do that and compelled me to do that was your conviction and how much just truth was coming through you. Yeah. You know, it was I can't not do this. Any technical or logistical reasons why I may need to have that over the next 2-3 months just aren't fucking important in the scale of things. Yeah. This needs to happen, so here you go. So that's not something I'm going to bend over backwards to do just for anyone. And sure. I think that's really the distinction between really a desire to help and support people and just being a savior, to try and just help anyone.
Thanks for addressing that distinction. I think it's a really important one as well for people to know about, right? This kind of aspect of, yes, serving people on their journeys, supporting them, but at the same time not falling into that savior complex, right?
Not doing the work for them.
Yeah, exactly.
There needs to be already enough buy-in and someone actually stepping into that, and then it's just a gentle nudge along the way instead of let me do all this heavy lifting for you kind of thing.
Yeah, I love hearing that, man. Yeah. So why don't we start off by you just sharing with me a little bit, a 2 to 3 minute journey of who Pete Byrne is and how he got to where he is today.
I always ask people this question, and I actually feel I'm going to extend it to 5 minutes now because I feel the pressure of 3 minutes.
There's just been so much that's been happening, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
So the journey of, I was really kind of reflecting on this before. Effectively, we've got, growing up in Ireland, and we could go down that rabbit hole later, but effectively grew up in Ireland, always was kind of interested in music. And both my parents are personal development and kind of life coaches. I was always curious around, originally, to be honest, for the first 18 years, it was just trying to fit in. It was just that deep desire to be accepted by the cool people, by the tribe. And music was a path for me in that. It was something that I was really good at and enjoyed outside of it being something that was socially revered as something cool. So, I really dove into music and spent a lot of my kind of angsty teenage years in my room learning like to play lead guitar to like heavy metal, and I was in a band with like, you know, the head banging long hair, you know.
I love it.
And so yeah, so then kind of coming into university, I started finding my own a bit more and finding my tribe, and leaving a lot of the people who'd been in like my school, like kind of like fuck that, you know, found the couple of the best people, the cherry picked kind of like a couple of friends, and then started meeting new people and just kind of again expanding my network and becoming more and more myself. And through university, started playing music at shows at the university, like big events, like 600 people, and it would be like everyone goes to this hotel in the middle of like fucking the middle of Ireland, basically, you know, and just like there's a black tie, 3-course meal, and like a big DJ would come. I think like Bass Hunter came and played one of these events, like, and I've supported Bass Hunter, you know, and I was basically on for an hour before just G'ing everyone up, and that was like the moment of like, oh shit, like this is the thing, like there's like 600 people just fucking going for it, and like I'm the guy. And it wasn't even as much of like want to be seen as like, you know, this superstar, but more around like me being able to facilitate people having this insane experience, you know, and my joy and nuance of being able to like find like I'd be, you know, driving in my car and I'd like hear a song and it would match with another song that could be mixed together, and I would imagine how the crowd would just like flip out to that because they'd never, I'm like, oh shit, you know. So they were the kind of moments that were fueling me. It was like, how can I find ways to really like impact people deeply on that level, which is an interesting insight I've never actually thought of before. So I was doing that, and then came out of college and I'm like, what now? Well, I want to just give this music thing a crack. I want to take a year before I dive into any master's programs or anything. So I started playing music in a restaurant that I used to be a waiter in. And, you know, that was a really epic time of just like getting paid 3 times the amount of money that I was getting paid on the floor to sit on stage, play guitar and sing. I was like, fuck, I'm never going back to that, you know? So once I'd kind of tasted the sweet nectar of that, it was game over. So as soon as that job ended, I, you know, really went all in on just like, it was one of these moments of like, you know, that restaurant was like, yeah, you know, we don't need you to do that anymore. And like, it seemed like the doors were closing, and then I'm like, no, I'm not going to accept that as my reality. So picked up the phone and spent about 4 to 6 months just calling every fucking venue in Dublin. Like they didn't even have music. I'm like, hey, I can come and do music, you know? And, it was really like this again, which is a lesson that continues to pop up in my life, which is just the power of like, you know, a vision and consistent action towards that vision. Even in the face of other people saying like, it's not going to happen, or the evidence not really, you know, necessarily being presented immediately of like, oh, this is going to be a surefire win. It's like, no, I'm doing this and I want to do this. And I will do this until it works, you know, as long as it takes. So, just basically ended up building up a pretty nice setup in Ireland playing music, which resulted in being offered a job to go play in Paris. So I was playing in the Irish bars of Paris for about 7 months, went to Greece and spent a summer in the Greek islands, which opened doors to go play in Norway, in Denmark, in Australia, in Thailand. And I just started traveling and playing music. And really it was this like kind of peeling back of the layers of the onion, of the concentric circle of like, you know, originally it was like, oh, I just want to fit in. It's like, oh, wow, I can play music and this is great. And oh, I can get actually paid to play music. Oh, I can travel with music. Oh, I can actually go to these amazing places. And like, it was just like, you know, deepening. And it was like, kept finding that edge of like, wow, this is amazing. How could you do this as a life, you know? So basically, you know, we'll call it pre-Bali A. Okay, so pre-Bali A is like traveling the world, partying, like being the life of the party. You know, there's new locations, great people, there's women, there's the dream life, you know, the life that everyone believes, you know, if you're a musician traveling the world, that I was doing that, you know. And that was really great, particularly in Greece, because I was able to create a very predictable and controlled situation where a lot of my basic needs were being met. So
which ones would those be?
Yeah, so basically like my desire to, you know, for connection, okay, to, you know, be able to play music and to express myself in that way, and to even have creativity in how I could, you know, I could bring in musicians because I was running this live music bar, so I could bring in a saxophone player or a violin player, or like, you know, we would go do these big gigs and like I could really curate them from scratch. So it was a lot of creative freedom, and I was very much a big fish in a small pond. Like I was like, this small island, there's one live music bar, like I'm the guy, and I'm then training all these other musicians. So I was also in a teaching mentoring role where I'm bringing in young guys. And again, we talk about like seeing the spark, seeing people who just were ready to go and they had the talent, but no direction. They didn't know how to do it. So just giving them a few pointers and putting them in that experience, kind of throwing them in the deep end, and seeing them turn into rock stars basically. And then actually I had a booking agency, so I was like sending them around Europe for gigs. So I'd kind of train them up in Greece, then I bring them to Austria to the ski resort where I was running, and then I'd send them off to Norway or to Thailand. We'd have the crew going around the place. So that was the traveling entertainment company. That was the company. So then the other parts of that was then like, you know, again being seen in this like role, and being a respected, and like people really knowing who I was and caring about me. That was like, just like to have that from a group of people that like really I admired at that point, because they'd all left their 9-to-5s. They weren't doing the usual thing that people back home were doing. They were like, they'd all chased this kind of Peter Pan life, you know? So I was like, wow, these are my people, you know? And then also getting to travel, you know, and be in touch with nature and swim in the ocean every day, and, you know, walk barefoot everywhere, you know, still do that, but you know, it's like, so that was pre-Ballier. That was like living the dream. Not to say though that there weren't shadows, because there was still a lot of moments where like I felt not really in that inner core group, you know, because there was a big group, but then there was like sometimes smaller events that I wouldn't get invited to.
So there was a feeling like you didn't belong.
Yeah, at times, yeah, for sure. Okay. You know, there was a bigger sense of belonging, but then at times there was still moments where those deeper shadows would show up. Like in hindsight, I can see that, you know. And then, yeah, like another one would have been like my desire for validation from women as well. So, you know, in that culture, there's a lot of people who are, seeking basically validation through hookup and, you know, connection with the opposite sex, going both ways. So, you know, I found myself in a lot of situations. I remember a couple of nights just being really, just in a shame spiral, just being really like, why am I not good looking like that person? Why did she not choose me? Why did she, you know, that kind of thing. So, you know, I'm not going to like gloss over it and pretend that it was all happy and dandy all the time. There was still dark moments. Yeah, totally. And actually one of the darkest moments, like just to be honest, was like, you know, as someone who was very like a late bloomer when it comes to like intimacy or like partners and stuff. I think it was like 19 when I had my first girlfriend, like, you know what I mean? So I was like pretty much a late to the party, you know? And as a result, you know, mid-20s in this amazing travel party environment, you know, as a musician, it's like, well, happy days. That's a good way to like, you know, catch up on any lost time and really give that shadow a good run.
That's it.
So yeah, you know, one of those moments was like this pedestaling of like being someone who's like, like a ladies guy. You know, I'm like, wow, I could never do that. And if I could do that, then I'd be the best, you know, it'd be so great. And then to get to a point where, you know, having that experience of finally reaching that moment, you know, without going into details, like just having an experience of like a target or a goal that I thought that would make me like the man or really happy. And I remember like that night just being like, I feel like literally one of the worst I've ever felt in my life, you know, like just like disgusted with myself.
Imagine the vision in many ways, or the pursuit that you were on in many ways, it crashed. It fully it revealed truth, like, you know. It's like this dream that had been kind of presented and I'd bought into was like quite the opposite of what actually reality was. So yeah, it's a rude awakening, and like there's plenty of those moments that exist in society for the things that are presented as the answer, like are actually like oftentimes like the opposite of the answer. As anyone who's kind of pursued a materialistic lifestyle in the past will have learned, and I'm sure if they're listening to this podcast, maybe there's some inquiry around like, is the thing that I believed I should be doing actually the thing that I should be doing? And that's the second mountain, you know. And in many ways as well, I feel, you know, I can relate to a lot of the things that you're saying. And from my own experiences, I feel like I had to go on a pursuit of those things to recognize that they're not the thing.
Totally.
Right? So in some ways, we have to embark on that journey. And as you say, climb the first mountain to only recognize that is not the path that we want to go on.
Yeah.
And that kind of initiates the path to the second mountain. So maybe we can segue to that path for you.
Sure, yeah. Well, you know, between the first and second mountain, there's a pretty gnarly crevice that you got to navigate and go through. So,
what was that crevice for you? Tell me about it.
Well, that was pre-Bali part B, which was like a really significant like health crash, where basically this lifestyle I've been living for kind of 4.5 years, really just kind of reached a boiling point where a lot of the things that I'd been kind of just pushing with and just keeping going, because I was in such a basically a high tone environment, and like very much tripled down on this as a lifestyle and as the way like I was receiving validation, like, and like this is my identity and all that kind of thing. So, I wasn't going to stop anytime soon. So it took a pretty significant crash to bring me down, which is what happened, which I basically had just a moment at the end of the 2016 summer where I was playing on stage. It had been 4 months of just like pushing. And I think that night I was like just drinking Jaeger bombs to just keep me going, because I was the only musician who was left on the island, and there was like a massive group had just been in the bar, and it was 3 hours I just had to keep going and going. And I just remember like there was a moment where like I pretty much just maxed myself out. It was pretty much like a shutdown.
Right.
My nervous system just went boom. And I was like having these like mad twitches in my hands and like blurry vision and like lost my breath. And I was just like, fuck, I've done something here.
Yeah.
So that kind of like, I thought that would go away, but it didn't. It was like a few weeks later, I remember being in London on the tube and just seeing like the person sitting opposite me just spinning. I'm just like,
wow,
okay, I've definitely cooked myself here. So I got home and just was like, of course, like super hard on myself. Like, I've done this to myself. How could I be so stupid? All that kind of thing. And yeah, really then just like committed to like finding the path out, So, I found at the time, raw food and detoxing, basically herbs and fasting, and that was like, oh, okay, I've poisoned myself for 4 years and eaten shit and not taking care of myself. So I'm going to do a massive cleanse, classic pendulum swing. And within that, I pretty much in like 3-4 months lost like 12 or 13 kilos and went from being like a pretty stocky, meaty guy to like something like a, like I've been living in a desert for 40 days, it was a lot. And then, with that came a loss of confidence in my physical, like body, like a lot of this was another great actually realization, because of my lack of safety and like feeling of like vulnerability when I was in my, early childhood or late childhood into teen years, I got really into the gym, and I was one of these like going to the gym pretty much every day and fucking beefed, so I lost all of that, and that took away the armor. So I was now quite like vulnerable, and that was a part of my identity as well.
Yeah,
like
people couldn't use that to validate yourself anymore.
Totally. Yeah, it's not like, oh yeah, these people like me or this girl likes me because of my muscles. It's like, there I am, and so that created a sense of like just a frailty in myself, and also this like lightheaded, blurry vision kind of thing that went on really almost for 2 years, honestly. And I was really looking for the answer. So I was traveling, I was going to Thailand, I started doing yoga in Thailand, I did a Reiki course, and then the following year I went to India, did a sound healing course in Goa. So it's kind of like, okay, like there's something else going on here. I started, actually that was a big thing in Thailand. I was still playing shows, but I was like, resting, eating fruit all day, and then I'd show up for like 2 hours, do my thing, get paid and fuck off. Yeah. I just couldn't be in that party environment. I started to see everything for what it was. I'd be in the bar and I'd be like, yeah, this is great vibe. And I'd be seeing everyone, just the unconsciousness of everyone just like avoiding their stuff. And of course I was repulsed by the same thing that had drawn me in, as the pendulum swing. Yeah. So, I was like, judging them and these fucking people, and wanting nothing to do with it. So, what that resulted in then was, me kind of going in the route of finding solutions in different paths. So one route was the body with the fasting and the dieting and stuff, but another route was the mind. So I found Joe Dispenza. I'd been listening to Esther Hicks, like Abraham Hicks, for Law of Attraction for like since I was like 18. Actually, I'd kind of always had it. I'd put it on going to bed. My mum used to say, "Oh, listen to that," and I just kind of, it was a nice thing to fall asleep to because she just kind of talks shit. So I was like, cool. So yeah, I really started diving back into her work, and that was like a real anchor for me. Joe Dispenza's meditations for sure as well. I remember having one experience in Thailand where I really dropped in. And yeah, I remember having this massive surge of energy through my body. and just been like, whoa, what the fuck was that? You know, and knowing I just created that consciously in some way. So, you know, that kind of opened the doors to like the potential what's possible for me. Like those, at least those meditations that I was using from him, or it took a lot of discipline, like to sit for an hour and 10 minutes and like take 20 minutes to fucking listen to him doing in space and, you know, to just get into the zone where you could start to make some changes. So I found myself quite impatient with that as a process, but it was still, it opened the door. And yeah, so like just to kind of bring that to the end of like pre-Bali part B was continuing to travel, continuing to play, finding ways that I didn't always have to be on stage. So bringing up the booking agency and yeah, really finding a way that I could still continue to live this, you know, amazing life I'd created with like the traveling and the people and nature and, you know, the amazing, just, you know, even I was really enjoying food on a new level. So the fruit, it was in tropical countries. Like, I love this. Like, I want to keep this going. So for me then, you know, at that point, I was still really looking for like, how can I really on a deeper level change or fix what's happening here? And, you know, Bali really seemed like a good halfway house where I could have all the community potentially if I built it up over time. And there was a good live music scene here. And, you know, there was, yeah, just that climate and the tropical country and all the amazing food. I'd been here before. I was like, wow, this place is amazing. So, yeah, you know, I really committed to coming here for 6 months.
When was that?
That was the beginning of 2020.
All right.
So yeah, so that was like my initial goal was come to Bali, you know, get my artist visa, play shows, and, you know, be able to be here and to build up a community here and see what happens. So that was the intention.
Yeah. And then the pandemic happened, right?
Yeah, that was it. So, you know, rolled in here and I think I played like 2 shows and then everyone shut down. And I was like, all right, well, I'm not going anywhere. And I saw how a lot of people jumped ship. A lot of people that I knew here were just like, I'm getting the fuck out of here.
Yep.
You know, and I was like, well, I got nowhere to be. So, you know, just got this visa. So I may as well just chill here and see what happens. And I feel with that, it was a really beautiful time here during the pandemic because the kind of quality of people who stayed like were people who, you know, they weren't just here on a 2-week bintang holiday, you know, like drinking beers. They were self-sufficient to some degree, maybe working online, or they had already made a lot of money, and they were open-minded. They weren't scared by the media and all that was been peddled. You know, the world's going to end. Like, fuck that. Like I was saying, I was like, this is horseshit. Like this is no worries, you know? So I was confident in my own ability to come through that no matter what happened. So yeah, so as a result, I think the quality of people who were left here was great. And as a result, like in those following months then, I started to really meet a caliber of person that I hadn't really been exposed to much before, that I didn't really know existed. You know, before actually one big thing was I remember feeling like I was, you know, pretty full on the raw foods and like vegan, and, you know, and I remember thinking like you're either like a normal person who just eats like McDonald's, or you're like vegan and you're tuned into what you eat, and, you know, you're aware and conscious, and I don't do that shit, you know. And
this very binary way of thinking, very black and white.
Totally. And then, you know, what was challenging for me was then to meet people that were really deeply spiritual and I really respected as people and like their mindsets, but then they were eating meat. I'm like, but no, like, you know, this doesn't fit my paradigm. So it allowed me to start to see lots of you know, holes, and fair enough, you know, I had to develop a way of thinking. It was what it was, but once I was exposed to a whole new reality, you know, a lot of those old ways that I was gripping to were started to fall away.
And tell us how you got from here into a journey of exploring coaching, breathwork, and ultimately finding a new way of, as you already expressed before, creating these experiences for people, but now in a new way, exploring it more from the lens of transformation.
So yeah, in those first couple of months in Bali, what started to happen was, it was like a really interesting reset because, you know, I'd developed this, you know, musician persona, and, you know, that was my income. And, you know, there was many benefits to that. There was also a lot of shortcomings to that, which was like needing to have these late nights, 4 nights a week, and, you know, needing to just basically please people with music, you know. Not a lot of times that, you know, it was playing songs that I didn't actually maybe really want to play, but it worked. So, okay, it's a strategy for having my needs met. So Here we go. So what led me to the breathwork and coaching was a curiosity, first of all, and being in Bali, I'm like, okay, well, let's go deep. Let's explore lots of different modalities and things. I just started to meet some really interesting people. I actually became a part of a men's circle quite early on, and there was 12 of us that used to meet on a rooftop every Monday at 6 a.m. So that was like a real window into like, oh wow, these are like all solid guys that I really respect. And that was quite confronting for me, you know what I mean? To really feel where I stood or where I felt I stood in relation to them.
Where do you believe you stood in those moments? Like, what was so confronting about that?
It brought up a lot of my memories from school, and feeling like very confronted by the idea of like a group of guys, particularly all that had some degree of, I perceived as power, and kind of comparing myself and oh, he's doing that, and look at this guy, and he's got loads of money, and what do I have, so there was a bit of that, but again, more and more like showing up every week, I started to just let go of a lot of those stories and just see people for who they were, and it also opened me up to a network of like just really epic people. So like one of them was Edward, who's breathwork mentor, facilitator, teacher. And I started going to see him, and like my first breathwork session with him was just like, that was the moment I'd kind of like, it was like the moment I'd had in that Joe Dispenza meditation, but like times 50, in terms of coming out of that, was just like, holy shit, like this was such a life-changing experience.
In what way was it life-changing? So just describe that experience for the listeners.
It was very hard to quantify at the time. I just felt something deeply, and I was like, this is the thing, basically what it was I, as I mentioned, had been living in this still very high tone, go style, very extreme. And what I think I really tapped into in that first session was just a deep state of rest. It was like my body and my mind were able to shut off and reset for the first time in maybe years.
It's interesting, right? Considering your lifestyle as well that you were living out for a number of years, it sounded like you, in many ways, were required to live in a very, very high tone. And there was actually no ability to find that deep rest that you found in those moments, right?
Totally. Well, what I used to do is I used to do water fasting. So I would like do the 4-month season in Greece and just send it. And then towards the end, I'd start to taper off and it would chill out. And then I go home and I do like a 10, 12-day water fast. And that was just like my way of like hitting the master reset button, but not in an integrative way. Like, yes, it was a deep downshift, but ultimately it wasn't sustainable.
Yeah.
And I did in a lot of ways clear out some stuff. And it was an opportunity to really just be and rest. Like it was really deep rest, but probably not in a way that was the most supportive. Because then I just fire up again the following week and go again.
Yeah. So it sounds like you had no capacity at that time really to, I'm going to say, regulate your nervous system in an empowered way.
Yeah. Did I have anything? Yeah, I didn't even really know what regulating the nervous system meant, to be honest. I was just doing my thing. I'd usually just have my routine. I'd wake up and I'd, go and either go to the gym or go swimming, and I'd be playing volleyball during it. I'd kind of just like tire myself out.
Sure.
Doing sports, doing activities, eating well, and then at night I would play. I was dropping off doing the partying thing. Like more and more, I was like, I would just go and play my show. Wouldn't drink. I'd go to bed. But it was still like, it was relative. I was probably one of the healthiest people on that island, but it's all relative, compared to, I'm still living up here.
Yep.
So yeah, just coming back to that first session, I came out of there just feeling like, wow, like this is something that I need. It really felt like that thing that I'd been craving and seeking. So I started going weekly to the circles, breathwork circles, and just dropping in and starting to uncover these deeper parts of myself. And that was in tandem with doing, starting working with one of the guys in the men's circle who was a coach. And just like, again, like I was like, oh, like that's something I'm curious about. Like I'd love to go deeper, but do I have the money? Can I afford it? Like, is it going to be, it was mainly actually around affordability. And, luckily he was able to do me a really nice deal to work together. And, what started to happen was basically life became the container. Okay. So
tell me more about that. That's an interesting.
Sure. Yeah. So if I've had experience of going to a retreat, Okay. And like, for instance, Rick Smith's Awaken Leadership Retreat, where basically the point is you get in a space with 20, 25 people for a week. And in that time, there's a ton of exercises, and the whole thing is laid out to bring up your shit.
Yeah.
You know? And it's talking about, you know, in this particular retreat, it's talking about sex and money and power and, you know, rejection and like the voices in your head and all these things that are like supposed to elicit what's under the surface. And then within that, there's a space for people to be seen in that, to process it, to release it, and thus integrate it. So, you know, that was a really powerful experience, like being part of some of those spaces in my time here in Bali. But what I started to learn was like, oftentimes I'd see in those retreats, people would get really worked up about something, and they'd be so lost in their story that they'd miss the point, that the whole point of the retreat is to bring up the story.
That's it.
You know, so it's like the thing is not the thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny. So I was able to, I think maybe because I've been doing this breath work as well, find the space of the witness more, where I could notice myself like, I'm fucking angry. Oh, fuck that person, you know?
Yeah.
And realize it's actually not about that person at all. It's what my like subconscious is allowing them to represent. You know, what I'm projecting onto them. Like, oh, this leader character is really triggering me because he's not giving me attention. Oh, hello, Dad. You know?
So what do you believe? So thanks for sharing that. And, you know, one of the things as well that I've always seen in you is having this ability to really embrace all your shadows, like really being willing to look at maybe even the darkest aspects of you. And what I'm curious about for the listeners is, what do we do once we start seeing all those things and maybe follow more of a path of integration? What's that journey been like for you when you started going into breathwork circles, when you started exploring these type of containers, and how can we start bringing those shadows back and finding them, let's say, a bit more of a wholesome way of being?
Yeah, so I think the first step is effectively just acceptance. It's like, this is here, and I can deny it or I can accept it.
Yeah.
Once it's accepted, at least by us, it takes a lot of the pressure off. Because if we're denying what is, then we're in a downward spiral. We're in a fight with ourselves. Whereas if we can at least say, right, this is here, I fucking hate it, but it's there, and I will accept that it's there for now. I don't think it needs to be there forever. I don't think it's who I am, but it's there. I think what's hardest for a lot of people is in not directly looking at their shadows. Like, they think by kind of semi-avoiding it that they're, you know, it's helping. And often it's actually by turning and running head on at the monster that's going to smash it into a million pieces, you know? So by really looking at it and having the courage to do that, that's where the dissolving and the integration of that comes from. The second stage is being seen in accepting that by others. So it's not just us sitting with it, but then it's sharing that and other people recognizing, oh, like I have that as well, and then reflecting, and like this thing that we were carrying is this deep shame piece of like, oh, I have this thing and I'm such a piece of shit. And it was like, oh yeah, I have that as well. Oh yeah, I remember when I had that. And you're like, oh, it's not just me. Oh, like relief, you know? For this, I like, our deepest fear is that we've got some kind of like, you know, unique, like disgusting trait that everyone's gonna like, exile us for, basically.
Right. So yeah, when we just maybe express this or explore this topic of the shadow, in many ways, it is those aspects of us that we've denied, right? The ones that we've repressed. And usually there is so much shame as well connected to them that we're even unwilling to look at them within ourselves. And so hearing what you're saying, you know, really allowing another person to witness them, and as well having or discovering that, wow, like I'm not alone in this, because that's the perception that we may have in those moments. It's like, oh, I'm the only one who is kind of fucked up, right? And no one is like me. But then revealing that, being recognized in that, and as well receiving the acknowledgement, you're not alone in this. I'm experiencing the same thing in many ways. That in many ways can be the healing, and I've definitely experienced that as well for myself. Yeah,
totally. And coming back to this idea of life as a container, right? In those retreats, like it was a bit easier for me to like be in that witness, because I'm like, oh, it's almost like, oh, I know what's going on here. I see the way everyone's really triggered right now. That must be part of it. It's part of the game, you know? So I was able to like be triggered, but also like actually kind of laugh about it as well. And that was where some of that like greater awareness came from. So I kind of took that concept and said like, okay, like let's say I leave this retreat and I go into like my week to week, and I start to go about my life as I do, and I start to notice all the areas where I'm getting triggered, where I'm having a limiting belief or whatever, something comes up, emotions come up. And then if I've got a support network around me of, a coach, or if I'm doing breath work, or, facilitator, therapist, whatever it is, that I can bring these things to, now I'm in a real life retreat 365 days a year. I'm now consistently gathering data about me and my environment, and I'm working through it. And this is basically where we take that, microcosm of a retreat and expand it to the world. So that was really what I was kind of doing. I was like in all these different things, and like being here, in Bali was really showing me all these different parts of me. It was showing me like my money stuff and my relationship stuff and my self-worth stuff and my comparison stuff, and just like general social pieces of like, where do I sit on the totem pole, and the nice guy stuff as well, which we can explore if you want. But like all of these things got to be really looked at because there was so much support around, because I was like, I'm gonna do this work, and I had a multitude of different, I was listening to the audiobooks, reading the books, doing the coaching, doing the breath work, and it was all kind of in tandem, synchronistically working together, towards this bigger goal, which I didn't know what that goal was, but I knew it was going somewhere.
What do you think was the biggest pattern that you really had to overcome or integrate into your own life?
Okay, so there's like the relatable one, and then there's the deeper one. So the relatable one is probably people pleasing nice guy. Yeah. The deeper one is I'm not enough. Okay. And
can we maybe first of all just describe for the listeners, what is that people pleasing nice guy? Like describe the archetype for a moment. What does that look like for you?
So yeah, the nice guy for me is in some way believing that like the way that I get my needs met is by bending or sacrificing myself for the will of others. Yeah. It's basically like the strategy is I have needs. Yep. I'm not worthy of having them met, or I don't deserve to, or people won't help me meet my needs just for the nature of who I am. So in order to have those needs met, I need to please others. I need to do things for others. I need to be nice. And I also need to avoid pissing people off or making them angry with me. No one can ever not like me. Right. That's like one of the biggest fears of this nice guy part. It's like needing to be liked by everyone. It's like, let's say 3 people give me a rating, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10. Oh, fuck. What did I do? It's fucking ridiculous.
You find the black dot on the big blank white piece of paper.
Exactly. So it's this thing of like the anxiety of consistently needing to be liked and accepted by everyone, which is fucking impossible. Right. Like it's not possible to be liked and accepted by everyone.
Hearing that, I feel like a lot of people, I can imagine, can very much relate to that. And you as well already spoke to the deeper underlying pattern, which is this experience of maybe not feeling worthy enough. I'm wondering, what has been that journey for you to really overcome that pattern and actually step more into an experience of power? And that's really been something I've really been seeing in you, especially over the last year. So I'm curious, what has that journey been like for you?
Okay, yeah, so a nice segue from nice guy, because a big part of the nice guy is repression of a lot of truth and emotions. Yeah. So a big part of that stepping into power is reclaiming those things. So it's about letting out the anger for all the times that you didn't want to do something, but you felt like you needed to force yourself to do it. For all the times that someone did something to you and you wanted to say, fuck you, and you didn't, because they had to like you. Like all of that's a volcano sitting under the surface that, whether you like it or not, needs to be let out before you can actually show up from a place of presence. And instead of trying to use coping behaviors and strategies on the top, which take a lot of energy, to avoid tapping into that volcano and the explosion, you need to drain the swamp a bit. You need to let go of a lot of that built up stuff so you can show up in power. And then you can actually be regulated and choose make your decisions from that place of centeredness and regulation. So that's the next part. It's like beyond the it's effectively regulation. It's effectively about like letting go of these deeper patterns and emotions under the surface that are running the show, so we can have control, so we can have freedom.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you're not in control. You've been run by the patterns and run by the emotions.
So what I'm hearing is that, in many ways, it was about honoring the aliveness that's present. You know, maybe that aliveness is coming across as an anger response, or maybe it is a grief response, whatever it is, giving yourself the permission actually just to really allow that, and learning the skills of actually maybe moving through those, holding those parts of us, and actually finding a bit of sovereignty within that. Is that the way I understand what you're saying? Or?
So step one, it's kind of like this. Okay, so the ultimate goal is to be in a place where anything can happen and I am unfuckwithable. Nothing you do can shake me. Now, that's not to say that I don't feel emotion or get triggered, but what I do with it, I have control over. I can choose. That's freedom for me. That's ultimate choice. So in order to get to that place, what I need to do is I need to expand my capacity, and I need to let go of programs and emotions under the surface that might be dictating that freedom to choose. So within that, there is it's not necessarily about like, someone pissing you off and then being like, I'm angry now, maybe, but not necessarily. What I think ultimately is, like I said, it's about having containers where we can look at and integrate those previously hurt parts so they're not the ones coming up. So, I've had situations in the last year or so where I've been in, discussion or in business or something with someone where in some way a trigger arises. And it's almost like seeing that person regress into a younger version of themselves.
Right.
Where they have no more conscious awareness of like who they are in this moment or what's really happening. And they're running a story, and all the information they're receiving from the outside is basically been run through the lens of that story. And it's very difficult to like collaborate and work with someone on any level, in a relationship setting, in a business setting, a personal setting, when that's alive, because all they're doing is like basically confirming or, looking for evidence to support what they believe is true already. So for me, like this deeper work and, finding this regulation and bigger capacity allows us to not let that lens and story take over. So we don't regress back into that old version of ourselves. Yep. We've updated the hardware. We've gone in, and previously where we would have reached our max capacity, and at that point where our neocortex goes offline, prefrontal cortex stops working, we literally go back into the animal brain, the limbic brain, which is only working from past patterning. Yep. Like we can only access, our survival responses, our fight and our flight, basically, or fawn or freeze. Well, freeze is down at the bottom, but that's all we have access to in that moment. So we go back to what we know. So this is why with addiction, for instance, if we look at someone who is deciding that they want to go on a diet, I'm going to go on this diet. I'm going to cognitively decide in my, rational prefrontal cortex, this is a good thing to do. And as soon as a trigger comes up, what's the body going to do? It's going to go right back to that old pattern, which is, I know I can buffer this emotion by eating sugar and drinking beer. And no matter how much positive intentions and affirmations and thought we want to put into that, as soon as a trigger arises, if you don't have the capacity to hold that trigger, you're going straight back into that old response. There's nothing you can do about it. So for me, that's such a big part of finding that freedom and that power. It's been able to have the capacity to hold those triggers. Yep. And also then have new pathways out. So even if shit hits the fan, you've got an escape route. You've got the ability to set a boundary or to say, hey, I need 10 minutes right now. And to know that you staying in that conflict or scenario isn't going to serve anyone.
This is really valuable what you're saying, in the sense that, when I embarked on this journey in many ways for myself, I explored it much more from the lens of the mind. And I was very fascinated about the mind, right? I really went down this path of exploring Eastern philosophy, went into yoga, and I was very fascinated by the mind. And it was an avenue for me to find deeper liberation. However, I noticed within myself that there came eventually a point where I couldn't go further. And breathwork and my experiences in Bali, having as well met Edward and as well having gone through the training myself, I've come to recognize the importance of really exploring as well the somatic element, which is much more referring to the body, and valuing the importance of embodiment. Could you speak as well to the importance of embodiment and why maybe following only our intentions through our mind, mentally, cognitively, why that does not suffice?
Yeah. So it's kind of like, right, so I love a good analogy, by the way, if you haven't noticed.
Please,
already.
Go for it.
So it's like the mind is the child and the body is the adult. And so the child can have all the best intentions in the world. The child can be like, I want to go to the park and then I want to get ice cream. And it can be really sure and certain on that. But the body's the adult. And if the adult says no, then it's not fucking happening. Yeah. Okay? So you can try with your mind all you want to force the adult. And that does work sometimes. If the child screams at the adult for 2 hours, I want ice cream, maybe he gives in. But it's not a sustainable strategy. Okay? So the body and the mind have to be on board, you know? And the child has to find a way of getting the body on board that they can work together consistently, reliably. Because ultimately, even if the child, as I said, has the best intentions, at any point, the adult is the one with the veto. Yep. So the body is the one that decides actually what's going to happen, no matter what the mind says. Yep. And yes, you can try and force your way into it, but it's going to take a lot of brain calories to do that, and it's not sustainable. Yeah. So a much easier strategy is to, you know, for that child, is to find ways to get the adult on board, you know, that so they can work together. You know, so there's a respectful relationship, and so there's buy-in from both sides, effectively. And it's a funny analogy, but like that's basically it. It's like that is the importance of embodiment, of being able to tap into and feel these different parts. The other thing is, on a more pragmatic standpoint, is like, if I don't know what I'm feeling, I can't express what I'm feeling. Therefore, I can't, like, even if I want to talk about the mind, I can't maybe even begin to quantify why I'm feeling that way or how I might get out of feeling that way. Right. There's just things happening and I've got no real awareness of it. You know, it's like there's a screen and behind the screen things are happening, but I'm only dealing with the result of what's happening behind the screen. Whereas if I can pull back that screen and I can see, oh, I see, this is there. And, okay, I see where that's coming from. And, okay, how would I work with that? Okay, this is what I can do. And I can communicate that. Yep. Happy days. Everyone's more tuned in. And the conversation is much richer and deeper, and there's a greater level of connection. And just like in that depth, I think lies the not just the key to greater levels of intimacy, but also greater levels of self-awareness and just being able to live life and relate with others on a much more and relate with ourselves on a much deeper level.
Thank you, Pete. I love hearing all this, and just expressing as well in detail just the importance to embodiment and mindset. And this is something I really want to as well hone in on in this podcast. I would love to segue a little bit in our conversation and come into a discussion around discovering your own unique voice and really claiming that for yourself.
Sure.
And in the past year, I've really witnessed you exploring new creative ventures and projects. You as well initiated Conscious the Musical with your business partner, Daniel. And I would just love to hear a little bit about that journey for you around claiming your voice and really allowing yourself to go all in on these surreal projects. What was that journey like?
So I suppose we can start with the musical because it's kind of like a really good trailhead to pull, and you know there's so much in that. So a couple of the key pieces that had to be overcome in the journey for that musical to happen was, you know, I'm not an original artist. You know, I play cover songs. I don't do that. I do that apparently. It also stemmed from a bigger vision which I'd had, which was this idea of Tony Robbins with a guitar. Which still remains my ultimate vision, which is like a seminar style, like a couple of thousand people, where like everyone is through music and through like embodiment and like guided meditation and like just it's almost like a medicine journey, but like with music and this collective group field experience of tapping into what it feels to be worthy. That is like the ultimate. It's almost like there's two parts. There's like people having the experience, the peak experience, but then also having an integration plan for after that event. So it's not like you go to Awaken the Giant within, you walk in the fucking fire and then you go, well, I'm great. And then you go back to your 9 to 5 in London, you know? It's like actually like a pathway for people to have that deep peak experience to see what's possible, and then there also to be a pathway to integrate that and to actually become that full version of themselves that they tapped into for a moment, and through that experience. So that's remains my my magnum opus. Like that's the big one.
I love hearing that vision.
Yeah, totally. So all these other things I'm doing up until that point are just like are still feeding towards that. You know, it's not like I'm working in an accounting office and then I'm going to go do this thing. It's like the musical and my own original music that I've been working on recording recently, and even the breathwork and the facilitation stuff is all working towards that. I'm running retreats as well. The Embodied Creative, we'll talk about that. Like, all these things are feeding into that, and it really feels like that. Even the podcast, to a degree, you know, is still working towards that. So yeah, so the musical, the big one was I'm Not an Original Artist. The other one was, well, to be honest, I'd actually had an interesting history with musicals because I actually got rejected from my high school musical, which was, it was interesting. It was like, that was one of those moments where like I had really put all my eggs in one basket, and I really, really fucking wanted it and gone for this part in this school musical as my kind of ticket to like, all right, I've been a bit of a recluse loner for the last 2 years, and this is my way to finally to shine and to be accepted, and like to like not get accepted. And that was pretty intense, but you know, I still kind of went all in on it and ended up getting like a minor part and like turning it into a positive experience. But it was interesting to then come back full circle.
Create your own musical.
But yeah, exactly, totally. I'd actually had another one a year later where I was in a different school, and I actually got one of the 3 lead roles in that. So I'd kind of already changed the story on that one a bit.
Sure.
But yeah, to come full circle, like how many years? Like 16, like fucking 30, 15 years later, 16 years later. Is this that? Jesus Christ, it's a long time. 16 years later. So yeah, to turn that around and to create one. And it was basically like, it started out as, me and my mate Danny playing at a friend's birthday party, just getting up and playing music together. And it was his first time ever on stage, and everyone's like, you guys are fucking great, you should do something together. And he's like, bro, we should do a conscious musical. I'm like, you're crazy, man, you know? But I'd been doing this, like, I'd done 1 or 2 presentations on this thing called Music as a Tool for Transformation. It was like using personal development concepts with music, and I'd written this song called That's Projection, and I was talking about that. There was a few, it was already some of the seeds had been planted. And so we just sat down and basically in 5 weeks just kind of said, let's just throw something together for this festival called Bloom Festival in Bali. So we had 5 weeks, we had a stage, and we needed something to throw up, you know, so we kind of threw the shit at the wall and see what stuck. And, you know, we really pulled it together, and everything fell into place at the right time. And it was amazing. It was so amazing to capture what is effectively the hero's journey. It's a story of awakening, of like a man's journey from his hometown, through like the trials and tribulations of the spiritual community and the awakening journey, which, you know, many of us have been on to get to that point of like greater self-awareness and self-acceptance. If
I can just comment on the musical for a moment.
Go for it.
I've seen the musical twice, you know, for the listeners, and I want to just express how relatable this journey is in many ways. And it's really a journey of one man finding his way to his own power, finding his own way to his truth, and really just doing the thing that his heart feels called to do. And ultimately, it's brought me to tears twice.
Wow.
You know, it's been a beautiful journey. And yeah, I just could really see as well how you were combining transformation and entertainment, you know, with this musical.
Yeah. That's it. And it's the chocolate covered broccoli, because people come for the singing and dancing, and then they get shown their shadows. Yeah. And it's like, oh shit, you know? So that's been really fun. And for me, actually, it's this, I mentioned before about transformational snob, and this idea of like the depth is really what I'm about.
Sure.
You know, like that's really what gets me going. So being able to work on such a deep level that sometimes I'll make songs or reels or something that I think are like fucking, oh, that's epic. And then other people are kind of like, oh, I didn't really get that one. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, and I feel like being able to express that depth and like the nuance of how we do some of the characters and how they express, that even if people might watch that again in 3 years, whatever, and go, oh, I finally get why he's doing that. Like, because I've now seen that shadow in me.
That's it. Yeah.
Before it was just a crazy perverted guru, like sniffing women. You know, he's one of the characters, Guru Das. And then afterwards, you realize like, oh, he's actually speaking to the like tyrannical nature of world governments, and you know the archetype of the manipulator guru who like, you know, has repressed sexual energy and uses that as a way to, you know, so it's like there's all these parts that we've really gone into depth on that appear as these like shiny characters, but you can go down the layers if you so choose.
To a degree, those aspects live as well within us. And as you say, you know, there is, of course, they're absolutely magnified to 100,000x.
Yeah.
But if we can really explore as well, where are those aspects in us to really reveal those shadows, and then as well claim that for ourselves, to maybe as well feel into the hurt, the wound, the need that's underneath it.
Yeah.
When we reclaim that, we can as well really come out on the other side feeling more whole, you know, and I can definitely see how the musical is a beautiful pathway for that.
Totally. And, you know, the final song in the musical is called Safe to Be Me, you know, and I think actually I can drop a few bars if you like.
I would love that.
Just as you know, you mentioned the journey of like going on this path. I think this song really sums all of that up, you know? I set out on a journey, seeking more from life, but nothing ever seemed to go my way. Well, I've been ripped off, heartbroken, and been made to feel so small. And so many people tried to lead me astray, but I know every part was vital, no matter big or small. 'Cause now I've learned the greatest lesson of all. Well, I'm safe to be me. I'm safe to be all the things that I was born to be. And even though it got hard sometimes, I knew if I followed my heart, then I'd find my way. And even though it got dark sometimes, I know it's all part of the game of life that we play. 'Cause you know I'm safe to be me. I'm safe to be all the things that I was born to be. You know I'm safe to be me. You know I'm safe to be me. I'm safe to be me.
Amazing.
You.
Safe to be me. I feel there is one overarching theme in our conversation today. It's really been that.
Totally.
Really exploring as well the theme of how we can embrace all those aspects of us, you know? Yeah, man, brings up a lot of emotion there, man. And I think in many ways that's the longing, you know, that's the desire for many of us, just to have that permission piece just to be ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's it. It's like, you know, what's interesting about the musical is that, like, if I was to write that song a year ago from the lens of Pete Byrne, I might not let it come through.
Interesting.
But because I'm singing from the lens of Johnny, who's like this lead character, who's not me, it's a bit easier for him to claim it than for me to claim it. But what I've found is, in writing it and then in it being performed and people enjoying it, I'm like, oh, I'm also safe to be me, you know? So because it's a big thing to claim. There's a past client of mine, friend of mine, she called me from the studio yesterday, and she was singing a song about like the divine feminine, the wild feminine. Like, she's the whisper on the wind. She's the, you know, like all these speaking about like, who is she? Who is this thing? And then at the end, you know, it was this line which was like, she is the feminine, she is the thing. And I was like, what if you sung it like, I am the feminine, I am the maiden, I am the, and it was like, oh no, I can't claim that.
Closer to the bone, eh?
Yeah, exactly. It's different to say she is that. It's over there. It's her.
Yep.
You know, but really claiming that, you know, for ourselves. Like, I am this. Like, I am enough. You know, it's hard. You know, it's not, because you really like in that moment, in dropping that line, if there's any part of us that goes, but you're not. You're fucking not enough. It's like, it won't land. It won't resonate. So we really have to be in full alignment for that to really land. But yeah, what I think the musical has allowed me to do is to, first of all, see the power of comedy as a tool for transformation. You know, obviously music I knew, but recognizing how we can really, with music and with comedy, we can bring people down into the deep end, and we can control. It's almost like going on like you're a deep sea diver and you're going down to 100 meters with your, you know, your oxygen mask and all that kind of thing. Sometimes people use comedy a bit too harsh, so we can go really deep.
Sure.
I had on a podcast before where I was with someone, we were going super deep, and you know, got to this really intimate kind of nice moment, you know, this really deep sharing moment, and then there was a joke cracked, and it was like someone pulled the life vest and just went boop straight back up to the surface, you know, that we were at that depth of 100 meters. But what I find with the music and comedy is that we can actually curate that journey where it's this, like, we go deep, but we also can bring people out of it slowly as well. Exactly. And I think that's a big part of it as well. It's kind of like, same with any journey, if there's not a proper integration at the end, then it kind of feels a bit jarring. Whereas if we can find a way to bring people there, but also like, to kind of gently bring them out of it as well, they can walk away from that experience feeling like really complete. Yeah. And that was our goal with the musical, to like bring people to these fucking edgy places, but they walk away integrated. Yeah.
And from my experience as well, combining comedy and offering as well a bit of that lightness. Yeah. It's as if it makes it a bit more accessible for some people who may not be as willing to embark on a journey like that. Yeah. And having as well, you know, done your embodied creator workshop, and I know as well you have a retreat coming up. I've really seen the value of, you know, exploring maybe as well these darker aspects of me and these shadow aspects, but then bring it through with humor, bring it through with fun. Yeah. Right. I would love to hear a bit more, like if you want to just maybe share before we come to a close, a little bit of that journey since the musical and as well the workshops that you guys have been creating, just to support other people as well into really claiming their voice, claiming the creator in them. Yeah. And
totally. Yeah. So, you know, one of the first sparks of that workshop was in one of our sessions, actually, where, you know, I'd been exploring parts within myself, but, you know, when we did a bit of exploration around like playing these roles and these characters,
I remember,
you know, stepping into the asshole,
yes,
you know, and like really playing it out. What does it feel to play? And that was even, you know, one could say in a safe environment, just the two of us doing that. Sure. And it was still probably edgy, you know.
It was for sure, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember
so,
that.
You know, just for context, I got asked to like really step into this like dickhead character, you know, which was like edgy for you at the time, you know. And we can say often, like with any of these patterns we may develop, like for instance, the nice guy or the pleaser, often it's in an avoidance of something that's on the other end of the spectrum. But until we feel what the other end of the spectrum feels like, it's very difficult to know where truly we lie. So what the purpose is with that is taking personal development, which can be heavy and also sometimes a bit heady and boring, and bringing, as you said, that lightness and humor, the fun, the play. And it's almost like in the laughter and the play, it lightens the load of actually the depth of the work that's been done. You know, it almost feels like cheating in a way, because it's almost like some people have this belief that, you know, we need to be in process 24/7 and just like writhing on the ground. Oh, I'm in so much shame right now. It's like, yeah, you can be in shame and also fucking laugh about it. And it's the laughter, that's the life jacket taking you back up to the surface whenever you need it. You know, that's your escape rope to get out of those pits of shame. So, you know, it's hard to truly laugh, like belly laugh, and be in shame at the same time. So that's the integration. It's pendulation between, oh my God, I'm a piece of shit, no one likes me, to like, ha ha ha, life is funny and light. And And that's really been the intention with the embodied creator. So it's taking the seeds of what we did in the musical, which is showing people the shadows, and then getting them to step into those characters and create, basically create characters that allow them to play and step into the parts themselves that they've been repressing or avoiding or believed that weren't safe. And so that could be singing on stage for the first time in front of people. It could be being seen as the dickhead, asshole guy, or the self-centered influencer, or whatever people we might judge or label outside of us. In playing those characters, we start to realize that, parts of us also, and then we have more empathy for them. And ultimately then we can, instead of it being an us or them, or like thinking that person's bad or wrong, and then also judging and shaming the parts of us that are in some way similar to them, by association, we can actually come back to a place of like full acceptance of others. Doesn't mean you have to go hang out with them, but like, at least you can say, I see why you're doing that. It makes sense.
Exactly.
And that's, you come back to this idea of embodiment. Yeah. If we can be embodied in ourselves, and then we can like feel into the experience of what might it be like to be someone else. Wow, I see how you're behaving. What must you have had to go through to end up in that place? We see that with breathwork as well. When we read someone's breath pattern that on the surface might look like, wow, super successful and confident. And then we see the breath pattern, we're like, oh shit, they're propping and avoiding and repressing, and oh wow. And then we start to see like actually the story that's been presented on the surface is not necessarily what's under the hood. And ultimately at the end comes with that a greater sense of compassion for others. So embodied creator is that's the intention with that, and with the musical. With the musical itself, I think by the time maybe this goes out, it will be online. We're going to launch it in 3 weeks. So you can go to consciousmusical.com for that one.
Exciting.
And watch it. And yeah, off the back of that, we've got a retreat at the end of June here in Bali. We're going to be doing some online stuff as well eventually. And yeah, we've got a couple of shows in Germany. We're playing this big event in Dusseldorf actually with like 1,000 people with Love Life Passport who are...
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, so we've written the songs. So this is another thing we're doing. We're writing brand songs. So again, similar to the musical, taking... the essence of, a brand or like a theme or an emotion, and like weaving in all the different, let's say, brand values and like the journey, effectively the hero's journey that person would go on, and writing a song around it. So it's a unifying kind of flag that, the tribe and followers of a brand or a community can get around. And so we're basically going to launch that music video and the song at this event, which is just another chapter in the tapestry of like the musical and all things around comedy, personal development, and using new fun and creative tools to help others transform.
Exciting things coming up ahead.
Yes.
I would want to offer us to slowly wind down.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm curious to hear if there's anything else that you want to bring our audience in awareness to about what's coming up and what you're up to. Is there anything else there for you?
Yeah, I mentioned we got the musical, the embodied creator. I'm here in Bali a lot of the time. I'm going to be in Europe for the European summer this year, so I'll be doing some in-person breathwork stuff. I've got some workshops and retreats in Germany, also in the Greek islands where I'm based a lot of the time. I'm usually in Bali. I do online work with people as well, one-on-one style. Would recommend the in-person breathwork container experience for the full package. But I really do enjoy dropping in with people, and I feel a lot of the work that as we've done in that breathwork training here really stems into like a deeper level of being able to hold space and guide people even in the online realm. So I really do still enjoy that work. I'm releasing a number of my own songs over the next few months. That's kind of been the final piece of the puzzle, really stepping into the artist. And maybe we'll save that for another podcast. But this idea of like finally getting to an even deeper layer of that concentric circle of like having the resources and the belief in myself enough to like record and put out music with no real sense of like guaranteed return. Like with the show or with these other workshops and stuff, it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get paid and people love it and it's like it's easy. And whereas when it's my music and it's the stuff I want to sing about, it's like, is anyone gonna fucking like it? Does anyone even care? It's gonna cost a couple of $1,000 just to do a song and then put it out, and then like what, so there's a real deep trust fall with that's occurring at the moment. And so I'm excited to release those songs. You can find them at Pete Byrne on Spotify.
Incredible. We'll have to save that for part 2. I definitely want to hear a bit more about that. where can our listeners find you or contact you?
Yeah, so, obviously Instagram, first protocol, at It's Pete Byrne.
Okay.
You can get me, as I said, on Spotify, the Alive and Line podcast, new episodes every Tuesday. So I kind of like to do interview and solo style. A lot of the same concepts and analogies that I kind of have been dropping into today. And also, my artist profile, Pete Byrne, as well on Spotify. And you can also go to awakenedutainment.com is our site for Embodied Creator and the musical, also Conscious the Musical. So there's a few different trailheads depending what tickles your fancy.
Amazing. We'll link all that up on the show notes. And I want to close with one question.
Please.
And as you know, this podcast is called Heart of Man. Mm-hmm. And the vision that I have in mind with this is to really support men and the women of, men, and the ones that really want to as well understand men, is to bring them to an experience of connecting to their core and learning how to live, lead, and serve from the core. And I'm curious if you could share one message, pass it forward to one of the listeners, mm-hmm. In 1 minute or less, of one thing they may be able to do today that could bring them there one step closer. What would that be?
Their core?
Yes, exactly.
Mm. I think we kind of spoke to it during the show, but to really nail it home, it would be the recognition that, like, anything that you're seeking on the outside, it has to start within. It has to be an inside job. So you have to be the one to accept those parts of you that you haven't yet welcomed and accepted before anyone else truly will. You might get lucky and get away with it, that you're like, oh, I'm a piece of shit, I can't accept myself in this. And others might say, actually, you're fine. But until it really lands for you on a personal level, you're not even going to really hear other people's feedback. But once you can accept those parts of you and welcome them, begin to welcome them, that's when your environment will begin to, like, your lens will change, and you'll actually start to receive the abundance of opportunity and love and possibility that exists already around you and outside of you, that these little few parts that haven't yet been welcomed into the tribe are still waiting to be met with. So that would be my piece. It all starts within. It's an inside job. Accepting who we are at our core. Yes. I love hearing that. Well, thank you for coming on the Heart of Man podcast, Pete. I really appreciate you. Thank you for being an ongoing inspiration. Thank you for being a dear friend on this journey. And until next time, much love. Thank you for having me, man. And once again, just reflecting this epic milestone for you and how much of a moment this is. And I have no doubt that over the next months and years, this is going to continue to blossom and grow in true bamboo fashion. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. All right, to all the listeners, I appreciate you guys. And until next time, much love. Thank you for listening to this episode. Your time and attention is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for my upcoming episodes. And in case you know somebody who would find this episode helpful, I encourage you to pay it forward. Finally, if you've personally been receiving value from the show, one way you're able to support this podcast is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not only does this help more people find the show, but it also supports me in bringing more incredible guests on for the future. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and until next time, signing off.